This week's Parshat Pekudei is the last Parsha in the book of Exodus and the last Parsha to discuss the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. This Parsha discusses the making of the ephod, the robe that the high priest wore that had pomegranates and bells attached to its hem. The way the Torah describes this here and also back in Parshat Tetzaveh makes it clear that these pomegranates and bells were very significant and not just simple decorations. The Torah repeats multiple times how the bells should be within the pomegranates and how they should alternate bell and pomegranate. The Torah doesn't repeat itself for no reason. And both over here and in Parshat Tetzaveh, the Torah repeats this simple idea 3 and 4 times in the same sentence. What's the significance of these bells and pomegranates, and why do the bells have to be inside the pomegranates? Additionally, the Torah states in both Parshiot, Er and Tetzaveh, that this robe is l'sharet, to serve, so the high priest can minister or serve. It seems like these bells and pomegranates were integral to his purpose of serving. How? The pomegranate symbolizes a few things in Judaism. The many seeds inside represent mitzvot, and according to the Zohar, the seeds represent all the many different sources of light from God. Seeds also represent thoughts and wisdom. The seeds also represent the children of Israel. So the pomegranate symbolizes both the people and their intellect/wisdom. And the bells are obvious. They're the symbol of waking up. If we consider the high priest to be the bridge between the upper spiritual worlds and the lower world, our world of action, and we look at his clothing as a representation of this, I think we can see the importance of this robe. The high priest wore a puffy hat that represented a large head, and on the front of this hat, on his forehead, he wore a gold plate called a tzitz that said Holy to Hashem on it. This hat and its large open space inside is the space of the upper spiritual world, which he channeled through the tzitz. And all the way at the bottom of the robe, at the hem, we have the children of Israel and their intellect living in the lower world of action. And the high priest, through his own thoughts and actions and service in the tabernacle, brings the upper world down to the lower world, enlightening his people, bringing the upper godly sphere of spirituality into their physical worlds and intellect. All this represented by his robe and hat tzitz combo. Why is this important, and what's my point in relation to today? The purpose of the tabernacle was to give us the opportunity to connect to God and bring his holiness into our own lives and into our minds and perspective on the world, so that when we left the temple, we were still looking at our world through godly eyes. In order for this to happen, the high priest had to wake us up. For us to bring this enlightened state into our minds and hearts, we need to be fully self-aware and awake. We have to recognize our thoughts and our thought patterns and make deliberate efforts at cleaning out the old and negative thoughts and replacing them with new and positive thoughts. This was the service of the robe. When people came to worship and saw and heard the high priest because of the bells inside of the pomegranates, they understood that symbolically he was ringing a bell inside their heads. True change and enlightenment can only come through being wide awake, through mindfulness and awareness. I think the high priest's hat and tzitz above and robe hem with pomegranates and bells below were all designed to channel and teach mindfulness to the people. What this tells us is that anyone that's serious about changing their paradigm needs to look at mindfulness, self-awareness, and meditation as necessary parts in this process, in their process. For those new to this, an exercise would be to look at the thoughts in your head, not as your own, but as your mind's thoughts. Don't think of yourself as your mind. Think of yourself as a consciousness above your mind that controls your mind. And then look at some of your thoughts critically and see if they're aligned with who you want to be or even who you believe you already are. If those thoughts are not aligned with who you want to be, then you know you did the exercise correctly. This is the beginning of self-awareness, and you're now on your way to building your very own temple for God's presence in your mind. Shabbat Shalom again from exile. I hope to be back home in our Holy Land for next Shabbat, and I hope you all join me with the coming of the Mashiach, which I know we all yearn for.